So in the last video, we were introduced to arrays and what arrays look like in pseudocode and what their function is in programming in general. Now, before we start programming them within Python, I want to introduce to you, if you haven't started using them already, comments. Now, as our programs are becoming more complex and longer, it is really important to aid their maintainability by using not only suitably named variables, suitably named lists and arrays, laying out your code in a neat fashion, but to comment on those lines of code. Now, there are two ways that you can add comments to your code, and that is a single line comment, and you use a hash. You can see it's gone red. So single line comment like that. Spell it correctly would be a good thing. And so I could put something like define var and assign value like that, and then I could do num equals 45. Okay. Now, if you want a comment to go over multiple lines, so perhaps you've got a section of your code and you need to write a note to yourself or to the program that might look at it in the future to explain in detail what's actually happening, you can do a multi-line quote. So you can do 3 single quotes or 3 double quotes in a line, and then write this is a you wouldn't write this, but multi-line quote or comment, and then finish that with the same. So if you use 3 double, you have to use 3 double at the end, or 3 single. I tend to use singles because then it does differentiate it a little bit from a string. So if I were to say print, I could say, not that I would use one of these lines for that, but printing the contents and then of the variable 1, 2, 3, and then I could write print. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the IDE, so the integrated development environment, and the interpreter completely ignores those lines. So this line here, and these multi-line comments will be completely ignored by the interpreter, so they won't cause any errors, and they also won't affect the code at all. So I'm just going to put comments in here and save this, and we'll see over here eventually when it works 45. So no errors. This didn't come up with an error here, this didn't create an error, but it also wasn't printed. So it's a really good way to keep your code nice and neat. It's also good for you, especially when we start our controlled assessment, to notes to yourself to say this bit of the code does this bit of the code does that. But it's very, very important in terms of code maintainability when you're working within a team of programmers, and you can all be working on the same live document, that you are identifying and explaining what this section of code does so that other people that are working on it know. So comments in the code are really important. They will be looking for that within your controlled assessment. So get into the habit of now, from this point on, every time you don't have to do it for every line because that would make it look messy. But for the important sections of code, this section is doing this section is doing that, and you can get into the habit of doing those. I very rarely use multi-line comments. I think they look too close to text because of the colour of the IDE. The IDE has changed it. I always just, if I want to do multiple line, I'll do another hash like this, and I think that's much neater, but both are acceptable. Okay, so do the tasks in your OneNote. There is a bit identifying syntax error. You should know enough now to see where that is without me telling you. And then I want you to move on into coding arrays for the next section, but also commenting throughout for the rest of the time now.